So seller financing in short is basically, when a seller is acting as a bank, right? So you're not getting a conventional mortgage. The seller is holding the debt in a sense for you instead of you having to go to a bank to hold the debt for the property.
Your network is your net worth. Come listen to some of the most successful people I know share invaluable knowledge, stories, and advice in real estate, business, and beyond. This is Weiss Advice. Whether you want to take your business or personal life to the next level, look no further. Welcome back to another episode of Weiss Advice. I am your host, as always, Yona Weiss. That's my name. That's why we call it Weiss Advice. Yes, it's a play on words if you haven't figured it out yet, because Weiss sounds like wise, but it's Weiss because that's my name. And we're here today with another wise gentleman, Eddie Symmonett. I'm very excited to have you on the show today. How are you doing?
Thank you, Yona. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
The pleasure is mine. I mean, it's not an everyday occurrence. We get to have someone like you on the podcast because you're really someone who has started at such a young age in their real estate career. And even though, I mean, you are still pretty young in my eyes. I mean, I got all these white hairs over here. So to me, you're like just a few years older than my oldest kids, but you're doing so many amazing things in real estate and you have a vision and you have a game plan and you're executing on it. So I'm very impressed with you. I just want to get that out there and excited to talk with you today.
Thank you so much, Yona. I appreciate that.
Well, tell us a little bit about your background, because I did mention, right, you started 5-6 years ago, right, when you were in college and started investing, got into multifamily pretty early on, and then up to most recently just closed a few months ago on a 48-unit property and are really down there in Birmingham, Alabama, and just really doing amazing stuff with it. So tell us a little more about the background and let's hear what you're working on.
Absolutely. So I'll just take it, from the beginning. Originally I'm from the Bahamas. So I'm from like a small island called Nassau, and it's about 21 miles long. So it's pretty small. So we have like this little saying that if you drive too fast, you'll end up in the ocean. That's how small it is. So, I'm a small city boy, I would say, and just had big dreams growing up. I knew if I wasn't going to be like a professional athlete, I wanted to own some type of business. So that was kind of instilled in me from my family members and stuff growing up. A lot of people were entrepreneurs in my family. So that kind of stuck with me. But I moved to the States at 18 years old, played a little bit of tennis, and then I got a scholarship to play D2 tennis in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. So that's how I ended up in Alabama. And I was fortunate enough to learn a little bit more about real estate as I was in college by interning. So it was an agent, who also was an investor that I interned with while I was in college. So I would drive up to her office, which was about an hour away commute. So 2 hours total a day. And I would do that like twice a week to try to just learn as much as I can possibly learn. Because I studied accounting in school, but I knew that's probably not what I wanted to do as a profession. So once I got into the real estate thing, I said, okay, well, I found like my passion. I found what excites me and get up every morning and I can be excited about. So after I graduated, I had a decision to make. Go the safe route and try to get my CPA and move on to work for a firm, or take like a 6 to 8 month window that I had to try to get into the real estate thing. So that's kind of like how I got started.
That's awesome. And so you really started just learning on the brokerage side of things and in the investment. When did you decide that, hey, I want to switch and to get into, buying multifamily properties and really scaling that business?
That's a great question. So I have a story with this too. I started, I was selling properties and everything. I got into the creative option of like wholesaling. So I was doing a little bit of that. And I had one specific property, which is the first wholesale deal I did, that I just kind of jumped into it. I didn't have like a buyer's list. I didn't have someone lined up to purchase the property, but I said, okay, I have an opportunity to sell it. Let me go ahead and do this, right? So I ended up having to reduce the price like 2 to 3 times because I just got it under contract for too high of a price. When it was all said and done, I made like $500, which is nothing. Okay. It gave me proof of concept, but me, that's gas money. I was gone in an instant. So the shift for me was, when I bought my first property, because I had some money saved up, I bought it on seller finance. And when I closed this deal, Yona, I made maybe close to $1,000 that I got in the bank from the first month's rent and the security deposit that was transferred to me. So that shift was, I just busted my butt, like working hard to sell this deal, and I made $500. But I literally just closed this property, and without doing any additional work, I just got a passive check for close to $1,000. So that was just a light bulb moment for me, Yona. I said after that point, okay, I need to figure out how to continue doing this and how to scale this.
It sounds like that's a real aha moment, right? The light bulb going off and saying, okay, wow, more work, less money, less work, more money, right? But obviously there's a lot more that goes into it. It's not as simple as equation of that. Obviously there was a lot of hard work and continues to be hard work in running the properties. But what would you say that's allowed you to some of the things? Maybe it might be mindset, it might be skill sets, team member. I mean, what is it that's helped you to scale and move beyond, a 3 unit, a 4 unit, a 6 unit, and up to now 48 units and now beyond? You're obviously looking at bigger properties also.
Absolutely. So what's allowed me to do it, I would definitely say just getting out of your comfort zone. After that first deal I did where I held a property, which was a duplex, shortly after I bought a fourplex, and at that point, I just thought that was huge. I bought it from this guy and I was like, okay, I'm on top of the world, like just 4 units, right? But after I got a chance to talk to the gentleman after we closed, I realized he owned like about 500 apartments. And at that time, my mind was just blown, like, because this was a younger fella. He was in his late 30s. I was like, I thought you have to be 70, 80 years old to own that much property. So I was like, hey, man, like, how did you do this? Right. So that was like the shift for me, just having an opportunity, to see someone else that was doing it, and then just realize that I could possibly do this too.
And when you saw that, it was someone that was obviously a young person, that to me was like almost like a paradigm shift. Like, wow, I didn't realize you could own that much real estate. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you tell yourself at this point in terms of your own goals and your own settings? Do you have certain like goals, like when I'm 30 or when I'm 40, 5-year goal, 10-year, whatever it is, that you want to own a certain amount or you want to do a certain amount? Do you have any goals like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say the closest goal to like, what I can relate to like on a day to day is like my yearly goals. So this year I set out to have a goal of close 2 to 3 deals, 200 units, and I kind of keep it general like that. That's just personally what keeps me going, but as far as like an overall goal, it would be nice to end up with 10,000 units, 15,000 units. I mean, it's more like that, goal that's all the way up there that just keeps you going, right? You may achieve it, but it just keeps me motivated as far as like a long-term goal. But on the day-to-day, I'm telling myself, hey, I want to close 2 to 3 deals this year. What can I do to push myself forward to do that? Like, what do I need to do today? Is it talking with more brokers? Is it driving more properties? I literally just drove a property today, like before the call, is a off-market deal. So it's just like, I'm trying to ask these questions every day to myself to try to give myself an opportunity to keep growing.
That's great, because obviously you need to do those actions. I mean, it's really those actions. And we've had many other guests on the show bring out this point that it's the small actions. It's those small things that you're doing on a daily basis that are helping you to get like the reps. When you're doing exercise, when you're lifting weights, you're not going to see results overnight. You're going to see, you just put in the reps, you put in those actions daily, and you'll see results over time.
Absolutely. 100%.
Are there any things that you're doing now that are helping you to hone some of those skill sets that you didn't even know about like a few years ago? I mean, think about our listeners right now. Let's say there's someone out there who's in college, who's listening to this, and they're like, wow, to own 90 units or to own, 100 or 200 units in a year, like that to me sounds impossible. That to me sounds almost unfathomable, because again, you're doing this on your own, right? You're not like, I know there's a lot of syndicators out there who are pulling in, multiple general partners and doing lots of deals like that. You're really, you're doing this on your own. Obviously you have some investors, but you're putting the deals together. You're running everything on your own. Like, how would you, talk to someone who's in that position that you were years ago? What advice would you give to them to like, just focus and make those steps to get to where you are?
Yeah. So like two things I would tell myself, if I was just getting started again, one would be to just focus on one thing, and the other one would be, get started today. Like the best time to get started is like right now. So on the first point, when I say focus on one thing, as a young person or when you're trying to get into a new area, it's very easy to get distracted and try to do too many things at once. For me, I was looking at trying to fix and flip. I was looking at trying to learn how to wholesale and buy and hold all at the same time. And when you have your time stretched thin in too many areas, it's difficult for you to actually get exponential growth. So my success really came from when I chose to like slow down and just focus on doing one thing. So first it was trying to figure out how to wholesale. After I got that nailed down and I got my first buy and hold property, at that point it's like, okay, how do I focus on continuing to buy and hold and get more multifamily units? So I would just definitely say figure out which area of real estate that you're trying to be in. And once you get that, you want to just focus on that. Like I wrote something down. I said, hey, I'm going to give myself 5 years and like 5 years nonstop, just grinding. And if it doesn't work out after that 5 years, then I can wipe my hands clean and I'll be happy because I say I tried my best. Right. But you also, you have to give yourself, that runway, to allow yourself to grow because as like real estate is a long-term game. Like it doesn't happen overnight. It's a marathon. So you have to allow yourself that runway, to get your result. And the second point, is just to start now. No better time to start now. Like if you're waiting on the market to go back down where you can buy things for $20,000 a unit, I have some bad news for you. That's probably not going to happen. So you need to learn how to adapt with what's going on. If it's a inflationary market or a seller's market, you need to know how to adjust your parameters to where you can still compete. So it's all about always continuing to be in the game and figuring out what things you need to do to adjust as the market changes.
Yeah, that's awesome advice. Many, many good points there for anyone looking to get into real estate. You have to pace yourself. Do you have any sort of like what were you doing? Obviously not everyone, maybe you can tell me, like give some advice, but I'll try to formulate a real question here. But did you have like a cushion or did you have another job going on at the same time when you started this out? Or were you just, let's give this 5 years and let's go all in?
Okay. So like for me, I had a job in college, but that also with money that was set aside. Because when I went to school, I got a tennis scholarship. So I didn't really have to pay anything. I got a full ride. So, but it was still money that was set aside for my parents to go to school. So, and this was like, I negotiated for like 3 to 4 years to try to, hey, can I use that money to do this? Can I use that money to do that? And then landed on the real estate thing. So once I showed my parents like the proof of concept, they were able to let me use that starting capital to get my first 2 deals done. But after my first 2 deals, that was dissipated. It was not left anymore. So I had to get creative and learn how to like partner. But yeah, starting money came from like, I had 6 months of savings, like living expenses from my job in college. But then my first 2 deals I bought with capital that I had, put aside for my college.
Yeah, obviously having that cushion helps a lot. You mentioned
Yeah.
something in passing earlier that one of the
Mhm.
deals you got was seller financed. Can
Yes.
you elaborate on that? Because obviously we're all looking to find deals, and sometimes you have to be creative, especially when you don't have a lot of capital to put
Mhm.
down. Maybe you can elaborate what that is for our listeners who aren't familiar with that term, seller finance, and then how did you end up negotiating something like that?
So seller financing in short is basically, when a seller is acting as a bank, right? So you're not getting a conventional mortgage. The seller is holding the debt in a sense for you instead of you having to go to a bank to hold the debt for the property. So you're putting down a down payment. Usually with seller finance is a little bit higher than normal. For me on my first deal, it was a smaller deal. It was a duplex. I put down 50% of the purchase price, and the remaining amount, the seller is holding that note for the amortization and interest rate and terms that we agreed to when we were negotiating. So in short, that's what seller financing is. How I got into like negotiating it was, at the time, banks weren't taking me seriously. I'm a
Right.
22-year-old kid at this point. I don't have a 9 to 5 job. So it's just like I already knew that I would have to get creative to get my first deal done. So the gentleman I bought the property from actually was one of my mentors at the time, and he owned about 12 rentals at that time. And of the 12, 11 was single family homes. I looked at 11 of them, but the one property I wanted was the duplex. And we went back and forth on that, but we were able to agree to something that was mutually beneficial. And we were able to agree to the seller finance terms.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
such a good deal. And like you're saying, in a situation that you were in where you didn't have banks willing to lend, I mean, that's one of the challenges that a lot of people have getting into real estate. Well, there's a creative solution behind that. Like, you don't necessarily need to go to a bank to get this done. Obviously, you have to convince the seller to trust you, right?
Yeah.
But that's all as part of the negotiation. So that's, kudos to you. Are you still looking at those options today, or are banks starting to see, what you have and they're able to finance your properties?
Fortunately, after you build that track record, like everyone says, and I think it's true, that first deal is the most difficult, like getting that first deal off. But once you can show a track record, then it's easier for banks to take you seriously. So for right now, primarily, I'm working with local banks or agency debt, to finance property. So the last one we closed, we had a Fannie Mae loan on it. So that was an agency that we got on it. So,
Nice.
I mean, right now, that's just like the focus. But when you have those unique opportunities where you see it is a seller that may be a little bit more motivated, at that point, you can go ahead and start having those discussions.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense. Anything else you're doing right now besides for real estate? Or are you kind of focused like 100% on, running your properties and running that?
Well, I own a management company as well, but we're vertically integrated and we're only focused on our portfolio. So outside of management company, it's just, buying apartments, and then continuing to grow the management company in proportion with our holdings. So we're based in Alabama and all of our properties are in Alabama right now. So the goal is to continue to grow a local portfolio to the point where we have enough infrastructure to where we could start like going, to further markets, whether it be in a further market in Alabama or out of state.
Gotcha. And you say you mentioned that you're only focused on, the management company is only managing your own properties, right? So it's all just is there, have you thought about like expanding that to help, bring in other deals, or is that not the business plan that you want to take?
Not at this point, Yona. And, we may be having a conversation in 5 to 8 years. And I'm like, okay.
We'll go back and listen to this.
Yeah. But for right now, the point I made earlier, I really believe in focus, and I feel as though, at least for me, I've gotten better, like a larger amount of growth when I really focus in on something, right? So for me, if I could focus on our portfolio and how to improve as a management company, I feel as though I can get a lot done a lot quicker, but it may be a point to where we have enough infrastructure to where now I can focus more on providing like other services for other owners. But like for right now, the main focus is how do we get better as a management company? Mm-hmm. How do we continue to buy assets?
Yeah. And obviously running a team and having employees, that's in of itself something you got to focus on. You're their leader, right? You are providing their sustenance. They're obviously doing a job, but you got to make sure you're a good boss, right? That's the main focus.
Yeah, absolutely. And even as a kid, like I was saying, I always knew I wanted to own a business. So I kind of naturally happened to get the property management company and, have a team behind me that I can lead. So I definitely, enjoy it, so now it's just like, how do we continue to grow? How do we provide the best services for our investors and our tenants that live at our properties? Mm-hmm. So it's in line with all of the goals we have.
Awesome. Anything special that you do? Obviously everyone has a different business model. Every property is, unique in its own way. But is there anything special that you're doing with any of your properties in terms of renovations, in terms of maybe adding amenities that maybe are a little out of the box or a little different than your run of the mill?
Well, one thing that we do specifically that I haven't really seen much of is, as far as an improvement, is the solar lights. So I'm not talking, not solar panels, just the lights, right? So solar lights. So I don't really see a lot of properties, at least here in the South, that really take advantage of doing like a lighting improvement that doesn't really increase the cost of utilities for the owners. So, we take advantage of that. Like this deal, we've got about 48 or so solar lights. I think it was even more than that. We got at a huge discount because I guess the model they were discontinuing it. but we were able to get bulk, these items and install them pretty easily. And that was a quick value add to where improve lighting on the property, and it doesn't really increase our operating costs. So that's one thing that we do. Security cameras, that's pretty normal. Most of the properties we invest in are like B, C class properties. So we haven't really stepped into that A class wheelhouse yet, where it's like primarily like it's amenity based, right?
Right.
So like more of our properties is like workforce housing.
Yeah.
So for us, it's like, how do we keep it clean? How do we keep it desirable for folks that are looking to rent in the areas? And how do we keep it, safe?
Safe. Yeah. Those are the main things, obviously. Keep it safe, keep it clean, keep it a place where people feel like they want to live. I mean, this is what they call home, and people want to make sure that they feel comfortable and are in a good place, a good environment, right? That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Good for you. Kudos to you on that. I mean, there's so many different things that you could. The reason why I asked is because I'm so impressed with so many, like this thing you mentioned about the solar lights. I would have never thought of, like, I haven't heard very many people using that at all. But there's just another example. But there's so many of these things that I hear different investors, which is why I love listening to these podcasts and interviewing people, because everyone has a different take. And everyone has a different approach, and that's what makes everyone unique. So take your approach, do it. And I think the main thing that you brought out there is, you're focused on giving good returns to investors, giving a great place to live for your tenants, who are your customers, really, and making that's the main focus.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
Yeah. And, asset management, right? Keeping those costs down and keeping profits rolling, right?
That's huge. Like, for instance, we just turned our unit for our new property that we bought, and we were able to achieve about $130 rent increase. And we were able to keep the cost so low because we are vertically integrated. So we have two maintenance techs. They did majority of the work. We outsourced the carpet cleaning and the flooring, and we were able to keep it within less than like $1,700. We were able to turn the unit and get a $130 rent increase. You're going to have units that need more work than others, but that's like a good example.
That's a great example. And that's just driving value, right? You've, and soon you're probably going to come into the stage, you're going to do a refinance, because obviously you've brought up the property to value, and you just bring back more value to the investors.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
That's awesome. Well, Eddie, I want to transition now. We call it the final four. These are 4 questions I ask to all my guests. And for you, the first question is, what is the worst job that you ever had?
Okay, so I used to work at a retail store. I'm not going to disclose which one it was, but that job, I mean, I would work probably 10-hour shifts, and I would be doing everything in the store. I would start out as a cashier. I would end up doing stocking at the end of the day. So that was just kind of crazy for me. Like, that was a little bit too much, and I was getting paid minimum wage on that when I was back in college. So I would definitely say that was the worst job. It was a retail job, and I mean, they would work us to the bone.
Yeah, that's draining. Yeah, that definitely is, right? Just on your feet most of the day and working, right? There's not much time to take breaks. You have your breaks, but back on the job, it's draining. I definitely know about that.
Yeah, it's one thing to work, right? But it's one thing to come to work and know what you're going to be doing. Like, okay, today, this is what I'm going to be doing. But like for me, it was just, the draining part was I would start out doing one thing, and by the end of the day, I would be covering like 4 people's positions, and I wasn't getting compensated for it. So I would definitely say that was the worst job I ever had.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Definitely doesn't sound so fun. Second question for you. What is a book you've read that's given you a paradigm shift?
So I would definitely say, I don't want to say Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I mean, everyone has read that one. So I would say How to Win Friends and Influence People. That was a really good book. I read that in college. It did give me a paradigm shift on how I talk to people, how I communicate, because as a business owner, that's crucial, especially in the real estate industry, because this is a people business, right? So you have to know how to communicate, how to share your story with others and share how you can provide value. So definitely that book really teaches you, how to better your people skills, right? Like how to be like a good person,
100%. It's such a classic book. I mean, if anyone listening to this hasn't read that book yet, I mean, it's just one of those classics that everyone needs to read, because it just teaches you some of those common principles. Like you said, how to win friends and influence people. It's really more than anything else. It's just being a good person, like caring about others, like listening and going out of your way to, to show people that you're doing something, you're adding value to them. This was like before it was cool, like add value, right? Like before Gary Vaynerchuk, right? There was Dale Carnegie, right? That was like the main way to do things. So we'll put that in the show notes for anyone that wants to check that book out. Highly recommended. Excellent choice. Third question, what's a skill or talent that you would like to learn?
Okay, I definitely think it's archery. I know it's pretty random, but for me, like, I don't know, like it's just something about that. Like I always wanted to do it. I never really had the opportunity as a kid. Back in the islands, I would take a branch off a tree and I would try to make a fake bow. So that even as into the adulthood, I'm like, okay, that's one thing that I definitely want to do. So I'm adding that to something that I need to do in 2022.
Okay.
I'm gonna go ahead and get an archery class.
There you go. Okay. We'll come back and check it out. On that note, I mean, you obviously said you played collegiate tennis. Were there any other like sports or any other things you're currently doing or?
Yeah. So I'm skateboarding. So that's one thing that's pretty random. I used to do it a lot as a kid. I got back into it in 2020 during the pandemic. I needed to get out and do something. So I picked it back up. And from time to time, on weekends, I go ahead and skate. I don't do too much tricks. I just try to keep it simple, but that's definitely something I love to do.
Oh, that's cool. We actually, speaking of skateboarding, if you haven't checked it out, we had an awesome episode on Weiss Advice with Mikey Taylor, one of the most prolific skateboarders of all time. And he's a real estate investor also. And so he basically transitioned from being a professional skateboarder to business owner, real estate investor. And he's got like 1 million followers on Instagram, just like gives financial advice. Like that's what he does. It's just like incredible. So anyone check him out. That was an awesome episode of Weiss Advice. One of the early ones, I might add. But yeah, random just reminded me of that. Sounds good.
That's amazing.
Yeah, he's a fun guy. Fourth and final question, Eddie, what does success mean to you?
To me, success is, having control, right? So having control over your life, having control over how you spend your time, whether it be, at work or with family, like just having control of that. It's the harder road to take, but, as an entrepreneur, I feel as though, I have that fulfillment, that is success to me, being able to say when I'm coming in, say when I'm leaving, even though we work crazy hours, right? But just having that control, like no one can fire me. Like that's something I've been able to say since I was 22 years old. Like no one can fire me. Like I'm controlling my own destiny. And that comes with a responsibility as well, right? So I definitely think for me, success is being able to control like the outcome of your life.
That's awesome. That's a great, perspective when you're your own boss and you really do control to a lot of extent, a lot of what's going on in your day to day. And if you want to wake up at 6 a.m. and start the workday, go for it. If you want to wake up at 10 a.m. and start it, like that's, it's your prerogative. Obviously, you have responsibility to your employees, to your tenants, but you have that control and you can make it happen and do it whatever way you want to do it. So that I love that. And that's something that the power and success of entrepreneurship is exactly to shape that. So I love that answer.
Absolutely. And, just tying on that same thing, we all know as entrepreneurs, like because you have that freedom doesn't mean you need to take a day off, right? Like you have to grind to get to the point to when you're able to do that. But when you're in that building phase and that building process, man, like you're working every hour you can get to improve your business, right? So with that freedom also comes more responsibility because you have to keep yourself accountable.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Eddie, where can our listeners find you or reach out to you?
So I'm on basically all social medias, Eddie Symmonett. I also have a YouTube channel where I share my journey and advice, and I just document everything I'm doing in the multifamily space. So definitely that's Eddie Symmonett on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and then also my YouTube channel.
Absolutely. And love seeing that. Love seeing your journey. It's been incredible, watching you thus far. Is great being able to meet you in person last year and hopefully many more, and love to keep following your journey.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate you allowing me to share your platform.
I appreciate you coming on and spending some time with us. So thank you. And to our listeners, thank you guys for listening all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, the best advice comes only when you ask. Real quick, I have one question for you. Did you like this episode?
If you did, I want to ask you a huge favor. See, the biggest thing that helps this podcast grow and that will spread this message to the whole world is that if you leave a review, a rating, and subscribe to the podcast. What that does is it basically tells the platforms that this podcast is out on is that you like my stuff and I'm doing something right. So take a few seconds out of your day, hit that subscribe button, leave a rating or review. I would be extremely grateful. Also, I want to hear from you guys. So I want to hear some feedback. If you have any questions for future episodes, please find me on LinkedIn. Send me a DM, a connection request, Yona Weiss, and I'd love to hear from you.